you could have somebody that is burned out and their colleague that does the same job, basically same age, same type of roles, so very similar in nature. That other person is not burned out. And you're like, okay, and the workloads are the same. Okay, well, what's the difference here? The biggest difference is mindset, because a lot of times with people that are burned out or approaching burnout, they start adapting this victim mentality. They're out to get me, they're overworking me, they're making me do all of this. And instead of taking ownership and taking, quite frankly, ownership of what reality is, yes, we are working more hours. That's fact. What's your mindset towards that?
Hi, I'm Zarina, and welcome to the Grownlearn Podcast. Beyond these conversations, I actively connect investors with high growth opportunities. Right now, I'm working on projects seeking strategic partners, like a $346 million real estate development, a revolutionary heating technology, and an AI-driven life insurance disruptor. If you're an investor, PE firm, or family office looking for scalable ventures, let's talk. Book a call at grownlearn.org to explore these opportunities. Is it really your manager that is causing your burnout? Is it your childhood traumas? Is it your environment? Is it your misalignment of hormones? Our guest today, Michael Levitt, is, I forgot your title, but you're a burnout specialist. You're an NLP expert. Hi, Michael. Hi.
Hello, great to be with you today, Rosina.
My pleasure. You're all into burnout prevention, and you have two books. One is about to come out. Maybe let's start with that. Well, what do your books focus on?
Yeah, my books have focused on burnout. I've written a few of them, and I've got a new book coming out later on this year. But we'll talk about Burnout Proof, which was my most recent book. And burnout is just one of those things that's been impacting a lot of people for quite a long time, and it seems to be getting worse, which saddens me, quite frankly, because there's methods and ways to prevent it, and unfortunately, a lot of people continue to uh, be in the situations where they end up burning out. And yes, work can be a big cause of it, but a lot of it is your own behaviors, your own habits, your own the situations that you find yourself in or put yourself in. And
Yeah.
one of the phrases I say from time to time and makes people mad at first, but I tell them burnout is a choice. And now I don't say that everybody chooses to burn out, but the choices they make in their lives, what the commitments they make, the decisions they make, where they choose to work, all of those things can lead to burnout. So yeah, I wrote the book, and it was to basically show people, here's the signs if you're not sure if you're burning out. And more importantly, here's some things you can do to kind of get back to a normal-ish state. The deeper work, of course, is preventing burnout from happening in the first place. And that can be some pretty deep work for some people because, as you mentioned at the beginning, sometimes people that are burned out are due to past traumas that can go all the way back to their childhood. So it's important for people to recognize what those triggers and those signs are for them, so they can adjust accordingly and do everything they can to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, it seems that burnout is a very wide encompassing topic. Like, how can we put the border? Is it like, because it borders to your overall well-being and happiness. At some point, you can say, yeah, I feel unhappy, so I'm burned out. I have no desire to
Yeah.
do anything. How do we recognize that it's the term burnout? Do we even need to give it?
Yeah, I
Because
think
I
in
know
many
people are taking burnout leaves. Why do we need to define burnout as a concept?
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably just use it as a blanket statement and instead of just understanding what it truly is. And I'll lean on the World Health Organization's definition of burnout because they had issued an ICD uh, a couple of years, actually about a year
What's an
before the.
ICD?
It's basically an ICD is a disease registry code. Now, the World Health Organization did not classify burnout as a disease. They classified it as an occupational phenomenon. So from their definition, it's predominantly happening at work. Now, you can burn out at home, especially if you're a caregiver or you've got family dynamics and it's prolonged stress. that can definitely be there, but it's typically driven from the work environment, and it's basically when you're constantly um, dealing with prolonged stress, you're overwhelmed, you're not able to accomplish the things you want to do in life. You're numb. And one of the things a lot of people ask me is, it does sound a lot like depression, and there are a lot of similarities between being clinically depressed and dealing with burnout. The biggest difference from my perspective, because I've had burnout and I've had been clinically depressed before, and the biggest definition or difference between the two of them is when you're burned out, you can still function. Somehow, some way you can get through things. If you're clinically depressed, it could be to the point where you're not able to do anything. And I've unfortunately have had both in my life, and so I can recognize the difference of it. But for most people, it boils down to, are you just completely, fatigued? You're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, your relationships are suffering, you're making mistakes at work. You're not yourself. You quit doing things in life you enjoy doing. If those are some things that you're seeing in your life right now, then yeah, you're definitely under prolonged stress, and it might be turning into what the World Health Organization classifies as burnout. And because the key thing of burnout is prolonged unaddressed stress. So if you've had a stressor or a handful of stressors that have been going on for a period of time and you haven't been able to address them or deal with them, then there's a good chance that you're burned out. If you're just overwhelmed because you're working so many hours and things like that, okay, you're tired, you're fatigued, but you may not be clinically uh, defined or described as being burned out.
Mhm. So what is the real difference between being overworked and overstressed and being subjected to this prolonged stress? What are the key differences that people can observe?
The key differences, of course, are the other things I'd mentioned. It's like, okay, if you're overworked, but you're still eating okay, you're still sleeping okay, you're still doing some things outside of work that you enjoy doing. You haven't stopped living. And that's one of those things. And what I mean by stop living is there a lot of the things that you normally do in your day-to-day life outside of work. When you're burned out, usually you start cutting those things out and you just stop doing them. That's if you're still doing those things, then right now you're just overworked. And there's a lot of industries that have cycles where there's busier seasons than others. So yeah, you're going to work more hours. That's the reality of it. And I think a lot of times what I find with people that are burned out, and I've gone into organizations where you can have somebody that is burned out and their colleague that does the same job, basically same age, same type of roles, so very similar in nature. That other person is not burned out. And you're like, okay, and the workloads are the same. Okay, well, what's the difference here? The biggest difference is mindset, because a lot of times with people that are burned out or approaching burnout, they start adapting this victim mentality. They're out to get me, they're overworking me, they're making me do all of this. And instead of taking ownership and taking, quite frankly, ownership of what reality is, yes, we are working more hours. That's a fact. What's your mindset towards that? Are you happy about that? Are you mad about that? If you're mad about that, why? Figure out why you're mad about it. What's happening? Why are you mad that you're working extra hours? What are you losing out on other things? Do you feel underpaid? Are you mad because they haven't replaced somebody that you was a really good friend that you used to work with? There's all kinds of ingredients that people put into this.
Yeah.
And instead of stepping back and looking at, okay, what are the actual factual situations at this moment in time? We've got customer work that we need to deliver. We have a lot of things that we have to get done. That's, but there's a mindset change there. There's a lot of things, instead of saying there's a lot of things that I have to get done, there's a lot of things I get to do. And a lot of people, especially when they say I have too much work to do. I tell them that's a good thing. And at first they look at me like, what are you talking about? Why is that a good thing? Well, if you didn't have any work, you wouldn't be working. You want to work, right? Yeah. Well, it's good that you have a lot of work to do. That means you have plenty of work to do. And a lot of
Yeah, but
people,
that's still kind of on the side. Sorry for interrupting, but it still sounds like an argument on the side of compulsion, like you have to work to earn a living. Don't you find it, at least I find it, I don't know about you, but like more inspirational if people are actually driven um, by purpose or by something that actually is an intrinsic driver for them? Because I find that most people that experience burnout have nothing to grip on. They have nothing that really excites them in this job. They're just there just because of this compulsion. Yeah, I need it's a job and it pays the bills.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. I hear people that are, working in difficult situations, and they're like, I wish I just had a boring job. And I tell them, I don't think that is right for you. And I actually don't think you actually believe that. And I love what you just said there because you have to have things in life that give you purpose and fulfillment. I'm not talking about motivation. Motivation comes and goes, but discipline and the desire to accomplish good work, and that's something I ask. I ask them all the time. It's like, what's your opinion of good work for you? What does that look like? Doing a good job or performing a task or finishing a project really well. What does that look like for you? Why is that important to you? Do you like that? And I get them to start thinking about that and asking themselves, okay, yeah, it's important for me to do a really good job because I want to be viewed as somebody that's valuable and I want my input to be heard and I want to feel like that I'm making a good contribution to this company. And a lot of times, again, when you're fatigued and overworked, those feelings start to go away and they're still there in many cases, but many times you're just, you're overwhelmed, you're fatigued, you're not sleeping as well as you normally do. And that takes a toll on your cognitive ability. And when your cognitive ability starts declining, then it's a domino effect and it can really be problematic for people. So again, you nailed it right on the head. I find again the people that don't burn out or not prone to burnout easily are the ones that when they go into work, they look at it as something to provide purpose. It's not just a paycheck. Because if you're just working for a paycheck, then you got to reevaluate things because we are meant to create as humans, and work is a creative endeavor. Even if you're doing something on an assembly line where you're literally just putting parts together or moving things along, you can be creative in how you do that. You get the flow
Yeah.
with it. It's like, okay, grab with the left hand, move with the right hand, go up here, do here. You can be creative in anything that you do, and
I
ultimately you have to
yeah.
reconnect with that.
I agree with that because I was thinking just now, I mean, it's a function of our society that lots of people, just because of the structure of corporations and how things are organized, they need to exhibit certain traits or focus on and develop skills that they don't naturally have or are not inclined to exhibit, just to fit in, to do the work. But on the other hand, you started off with it's a choice. Being
Mhm.
in burnout or not is a choice. So basically, they can decide whether to adopt the mindset of I'm trapped in this societal frame, or I can choose to operate within the restraints that I have and do the best I can. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a phrase that Michael Hyatt, a leadership guy that used to run Thomas Nelson Publishing, he talked about this. It was more along when the Great Recession happened in the U.S. back in, 2007, 2008, 2009. He basically said, I'm not going to participate in the recession. I'm going to make my own economy. I'm going to make my work thrive and grow. I'm going to get better every day at what I do. Uh, and he invested in himself. And I think that's where people, again, they don't invest in themselves. They'll invest and spend money on, your Netflix subscriptions or coffees or food or vacations and all that good stuff. And there's nothing wrong with those things. But I find a lot of people will not invest in themselves by taking a course to be better at what they do or learn a new skill. We for some reason we shortchange ourselves in many cases in that. And when you are doing that, even if it doesn't have anything in particular to do with the job that you currently have, what it does is it gives you insights on different things. And I find time and time again that even if you learn a new skill that isn't necessarily the same thing you do at work, it 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 reinvigorates you, and you look at your work a little bit differently and you approach it a little bit differently. And guess what? It's like you end up, feeling a little bit better. You enjoy working again. That, that edge that you've been dealing with tends to go away a little bit, and you enjoy being with your coworkers and in the art of work. And I see organizations all the time that are thriving, that are doing really well, and then there are some that are just, really, really having a tough time of keeping people or having them be productive. And a lot of it is just, they're not inspired or motivated. They're just kind of dead inside, and that's not necessarily the company's fault. That's on the individual. And go, okay, well, let's figure out, why are you this way? What's going on? Because a lot of times it's things going on in their personal lives, whether it's financial debt or maybe they've got sick loved ones. Who knows? There's all kinds of different baggage that we bring to work every day that has nothing to do with our company, but we bring it to work because it's part of us. We can't, as much as we would love to silo things and say, okay, that's home. I can't deal with that right now. Well, guess what? You're a human being. Those things are going to creep up during the day. You're going to have to deal with them, and it does impact your work. So it's, facing head on and avoiding the avoidance of dealing with things. And procrastination, again, is one of those big things that can lead to burnout as well, because you keep putting off something. Let's say there's something you need to do and you keep putting it off. Well, you know what? It's still in the back of your mind that you need to do that. So as every day goes by, you're like, I got to get to that. I got to get to that. And you're causing yourself your own stress because you're procrastinating on doing something that you perceive is not going to be a pleasant situation. But I find myself personally, time after time after time, if there's like, I got to get to this. And there was something actually this morning that I've been like, I got to get to it. I got to get to it. And I've been dragging this on for days. And I finally, like, I'm going to go ahead and do it. It was done in 15 minutes. And afterwards, I felt great that I accomplished it. I was like, okay, what do I need to learn here? And instead of beating myself up, I asked, okay, what do I need to learn here about why was I procrastinating about that? So if you're avoiding something, ask yourself why you're avoiding it.
That's exactly what I wanted to jump in with. But I'd even add, even before you accomplish it, just ask yourself, why don't I want to accomplish it? Or why don't I want to do this thing? What is stopping you? And then you can analyze yourself and find out your intrinsic drivers that are actually preventing you. Because maybe it's not really your goal. Maybe you're just forcing yourself to do something that is, not bringing you anything, or it could be because of whatever blockages you have. Quick break. If you're looking for high growth opportunities or expert strategy support, let's talk. I'm involved in projects like a next-gen biofertilizer transforming agriculture, an aerial mapping drone that's 10 times faster than traditional tech, and AI-driven innovations disrupting industries. As a fractional Chief Strategy Officer, I help businesses execute strategies and bring in top experts to get things done. Let's discuss your needs. Book a call at grownlearn.org.
Yeah.
You mentioned something like just a minute ago that led me to think about culture, which you also coach and speak on, company culture. And you mentioned that the responsibility doesn't fall on the company so much as it does on the individual, which I agree with to a large extent. But on the other hand, I believe that the company culture has attracted this type of individual. So the company culture carries in its DNA the type of individual that it's attracting as employees, right? So on one hand, the company culture carries this potential for burnout already because of processes, because of culture in general. Yeah.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I've seen that time and time and time again. I took over a healthcare organization several years ago that was averaging almost 90% turnover. So almost 9 out of 10 clinicians, master's degree level and above people were leaving year after year because it was just a horrible culture. There was no trust. The communication was not existent. The leadership just was not engaged with the team. The team, of course, wasn't engaged either. And after a year there, I reduced that turnover down to less than 10%. And I only using a Jack Welch term, dehired a couple people. The rest of the people that were there were there, and I've been away from that organization for close to a decade, and there's still several people that are still there that I brought on and were there when I arrived as well. And it boils down to communication, trust, understanding each other. You know, a lot of times you do the big picture thing where you say, okay, well, why are we here? What's our purpose here? What are you trying to accomplish in this organization? And okay, how, and just, asking people, if you were in my seat, what would you do? And that was one of the first things I asked. I interviewed the entire team, and I said, okay, if you were in my seat and you were running this clinic, what would you do? I didn't say what would you do differently. I said, what would you do? Differently is like tells you that there's, change things. And so instead of
Okay.
that, I'm like, what would you do? And, they gave me some great ideas on some things that they had been wanting and weren't getting anywhere. And a lot of those things made sense and, wasn't very cost prohibitive or anything like that. So I'm like, all right, well, let's just roll it out. And I started doing that. And all of a sudden, they felt heard. They felt, okay, I have an idea. I explained back to them why I felt it was a good idea. So it wasn't just this, yeah, it's a good idea, let's do it. No, I actually gave them reasons why I felt it was a good idea. And all of a sudden, it was like one of those connecting points where it's like, he understands me. He sees my big picture of things. And all of a sudden, everybody started coming up with some ideas, which a lot of them we didn't implement, but a lot we did. And it created this environment where people felt like they could contribute in a safe space for them. They wouldn't be condemned or shot down if I didn't do it or we couldn't do it. I would explain why, but I would say maybe we could do this instead. So you find that common ground where you can implement some things. But what that did is it changed the temperature of the organization. It created this culture where people started working better together, and we saw the performance increases. I didn't give out raises, which a lot of people are like, we'll give them more money. I find personally, even if you give them a really gigantic raise, and of course that might make a big difference in their lives on how they do things, but that has such a short return on investment because people pretty much return back to their behaviors and their patterns well, within a week or two after getting that raise. So everybody that says, well, give them extra money, it's like I've seen time and time again, the performance does not increase by that. It may be short term, but long term, it goes back to where it was. Because money, yes, is a motivator, but it's not the key one in my opinion. I've seen it firsthand. I'm not opposed to giving people money. Yeah, sure. I mean, cost of living it continues to go up. So yeah, we understand that. But at the end of the day, it's creating an environment where people feel that they are heard, that they can create, they can operate in their, sweet spot basically to be the best that they can be, invest in them, and all of a sudden you have a organization that's thriving to the point where you have people applying to be a part of it instead of you constantly recruiting to replace people that continue to leave.
Mm. I interviewed quite some time ago somebody who used to run, I don't know if it was an entire hospital or a ward, I can't really remember, but he was dealing with a similar issue of everybody being burned out. And that's when the question on my side arose, whether it was really due to mismanagement or whether it's due to the long hours people work. And it seems that it's not always bad management like in the corporate world. It can be
Hmm.
really a built up of exhaustion like it is normally in a hospital environment. But you mentioned communication is one of the keys to turn this around, and this is exactly what
Yeah.
he did, so that they had regular meetings. And the interesting thing was it was not done one time, like you mentioned, a one-time salary increase won't do the job, but the communication done once also won't do the job. It would also have a temporary effect. But what he did was he implemented regular communication exchanges. Like, was it once a week? I can't remember, but I think that's what made the huge difference in the burnout rate in this ward or hospital.
Yeah, it's just, getting everything out there and not letting it fester. Because I think that
Yeah.
happens a lot where if people aren't able to vent or share, their concerns, it's kind of like, dealing with like an infection or something. It's like, okay, it's there, it's not that big of a deal. Well, if you don't address it, it could spread and get worse and worse and worse. And unfortunately, that's what happens. And also too, it the burnout or the claim of being burned out, like you mentioned earlier, is also contagious, where people say, "Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm burned
Mhm.
out too." Everybody wants to
Yeah,
belong. Everybody wants to join,
yeah,
be a part. That's a sense of belonging. It's not the right
right.
sense to be belong. It's like, "Well, I'm burned out too." Oh, and it's
It's suddenly cool to
yeah.
be burnout.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you have an entire department that just is not doing anything because they're quote unquote burned out. They may be overly fatigued. There might be a couple people that are truly burned out, but for the most part, all the others are just saying, well, they're getting attention by claiming they're burned out. So guess what? I'm going to do it too. And I've seen that too, where someone's always being sick and calling in because they were doing things outside of work that wasn't good for their health, quite frankly. And it got to the point where other people started calling in because they got tired of covering for that person's shift. So finally the person that kept calling in, I'm like, all right, you've blown way past your allocated sick days. We're going to put you on a performance improvement plan. You can't take any more time off. You got to do this and this. It corrected the behavior. They stopped. They rarely called in. They got cleaned up. The stellar employee. Uh, I happened to look at, that was again an organization that I worked at over a decade ago. They're still there and they're actually in management now. So, by holding them accountable to take care of themselves, actually help them improve themselves to the point where now, they're in a management role in that organization instead of keep calling in and all that kind of stuff. So as a manager, you got to hold people accountable, and as an individual, you have to hold yourself accountable. And if you don't, then you're opening yourself up to all kinds of problems.
Yeah. Well, when you step in as a consultant in a client company,
Mhm.
are there any processes that you implement or advise to get implemented so that you can assure that burnout rate stays low once it's being corrected?
Yeah, the first thing is just kind of get a current state of the union, kind of see where things are. I don't start off at page one in the manual. I always like, okay, where are we at this point in time? And then from there, I go, okay, what tools that I use will work here, to kind of get them from where they are to closer to where they want to be. And you look at communication for sure. You look at the longevity of the organization as far as how long people have been there. Who are some of the key employees? Why are they a key employee? What do they do that's different from the others? What's some things? And then from there, you figure out, okay, you've got two or three key employees that are really productive. They do a lot of great things, and then you talk with them and you find out, okay, what's your your discipline, and what's your drive to do this. And then from there, you kind of cobble that together, and you go and you talk to other people and say, is that drive also there in these other employees? And they might not be. And then from there, you can kind of talk with the team, and then also the leadership, and say, okay, you've got two or three people here that are good at what they do, but they're not driven. They're not. They're here for a paycheck. Now, do what you will with that. Maybe there's another role within the organization that they would actually like doing, and give them a little bit more inspiration. And if it is, great. If not, then there's nothing wrong with letting somebody go that's doing an okay job. A lot of people say, well, no, you only get rid of people that are doing a bad job. No, not necessarily. If using a sports analogy, you want to win a championship, right? Right. Okay. There may be some players on your team that are decent or good, but they're not going to get you to that championship. So if you could bring other people in that can help you win, would you go do that? Usually they'll say yes. And that means sometimes you have to move on from some people. And again, it's nothing against them. They're basically kind of holding the team back or maybe pulling the team back. And again, you have to understand your people. And sometimes managers, especially if they're new, they don't know how to read people. They've never been trained on how to manage people or understand people. So you got to give the new managers a little bit of leeway on that, but also you have to encourage them as new managers to learn how to be good managers. And sometimes the organization will do that for them. If not, then it's on the managers. And I highly encourage you, if you're a new manager, to do this, to invest in yourself to learn how to be a good manager. And what good manager is depends on you. I'm not going to give you this is what a good manager is. It varies, but if your company won't invest in you and for you to be a good manager, invest in yourself to become a good manager. It will pay huge dividends throughout your career, and it'll allow you to navigate dealing with the human element of work. And it's the biggest element there. It's if
Mhm.
you can get your people to perform and also at least somewhat tolerate, if not enjoy what they do, you will see productivity go through the roof. You'll make better products and services. Your customers will love you more. You'll everything's a win-win in that type of situation, and it happens every day. You can see this, but unfortunately, there's some other organizations that kind of stay in that trapped victimhood mode, and those are the companies that eventually go away.
Mhm. Yeah, regarding dehiring, as you as you mentioned, the the okay performance. I am not entirely sure. I quite agree with that, and I'll tell you why. I had a few I've had quite a few conversations on this podcast with people on leadership, team cohesion, and psychologists, work psychologists. And I recall now, this is what like lit up in my mind when you were talking about the not top performance. I recall one particular conversation where the guest mentioned that there's a role within a team of each participant. And although they're not
Right.
performing as top performance, their role may be supportive, may be like a glue, relationship support, emotional support, so that the
Oh
overall
yeah.
team cohesion is better and the team performs better as a team, not as individuals. So yeah, just
No,
throwing
I
my
no, I no, I do agree with that. I've seen that happen, and so when when you are considering, making a move on someone, you have to understand, okay, what's, on paper, what are they doing performance-wise, and metrics, all that kind of stuff. You can see that, but what's the dynamic of that individual with the other? Are they liked by the other teams? Are they supportive? Do they do some things behind the scenes that helps
Mhm.
things? If they don't, and they're literally, they're not making any contribution that helps others, that's the decision. Because yeah, it's using a sports analogy, there, many championship teams, there are players on those teams that are not all stars. They're definitely not Hall of Fame players, but there's something they do. Just their presence alone
Yeah.
sometimes can be it, or they can come in and take over for somebody towards the end of the game, give them some relief. The game, they still win the game. They just come in. They love what they're doing. They're every day they show up. They're a spark plug. Everybody's rooting for them, and they've hit their plateau. They cannot get any better than they are. That's what they are. In a particular, using a sports analogy again. But again, everybody loves them. Well, you don't get rid of that person, or you do everything you can to keep them because, again, it makes everybody else better. And so I agree with your point. It's just when you're looking to make your team better, if especially if there's performance issues, to make your team better, that's one thing. If you're trying to grow your business, then there's other ways to look at things without having to get rid of people. I've worked for startup organizations that were infamous. That we had rapid growth and then we'd have to let go 20% of the staff and then grow again. That and again, I'm not for or against that because in working in that type of environment, you saw a lot of your friends and colleagues get let go, and you're like, why did they let Adam go? Adam's been here since day one. I've never heard anybody complain anything about him. He's always doing great things, but they needed somebody with different skill set, and the money's the money. So we went out and got somebody else, and the organization then continued to grow to publicly traded company and thousands of employees worldwide. So was it the right move? Probably. Was it a popular move? Absolutely not. But again, it's you have to you have to do what you feel right if you're in a leadership role. But take please do everything you can to take in all the information you can gather before you make a decision like that, because you could go from doing great to going down fast just by getting rid of the wrong employee. And what I mean by wrong employee, I mean an employee that you should not have let go. So I do agree with you on that. It's just there's some variances to it that I've seen that sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. What do you do in the Breakfast Leadership Network?
Yep, yeah, launched an organization a little over 8 years ago, consulting, the podcast show, lots of writing, and whether it's blogs and articles on the website or books and things like that. So I'm very fortunate in all the things I get to do. I love the work as much as I would wish that there was no burnout around and workplaces were all doing really well and I'd find something else to do, but that's not the reality. So, whatever I can do to help organizations and individuals have better and healthier workplaces and, be better people, then that's why I do what I do.
Do you find one forward-looking question? Do you think there's going to be an increase or a decrease in burnout with the economic situation getting
I think
more difficult?
I don't think it's going to get any easier. I think with the financial challenges and in my personal opinion, I think financial stress is probably one of the worst stressors out there, because even though I don't think any of us like paying bills, we do like the ability to be able to pay bills. And when the financial challenges that we're seeing across the planet gets to the point where it's becoming harder and harder to be able to afford the basics of life, not just the fun stuff, but just the basics. Like for example, I know in the U.S. There's several examples where a dozen eggs are $13 a carton. They used to
Well,
be
that was in
two.
January. Now, according to the latest numbers, they're back to 445 or something like that.
Well, there was protests yesterday in Chicago because the eggs at one of the major chains there were $13. So it
Seriously?
has
Wow.
it hasn't hit every market yet, but
Wow.
it's ebbs and flows, and understanding it. I anticipate that the prices will come down at some point because of the reason behind it, or at least what we were told was bird flu, and there were a lot of chickens that were put down because unfortunately bird flu from all the studies can pass through. So, the eggs and everything like that. So, they took a proactive approach. And it's like, okay, we need to eradicate this situation, which of course lowered the supply of eggs in the industry, and which of course is supply and demand. If you paid attention in economics, I mean, there's less supply, the demand's going to go up, so the prices are going to go up, and I think it'll adjust. But that's one example where the cost of everything is much higher than it has been, excluding the situation that's happening now, from the United States when it comes to tariffs and all of that. It's going to make things harder for a lot of people, and that puts on stress. And when you have that financial stress going on, you bring that to work, unfortunately. And I see it's going to get harder and harder, and you're going to see performance drop, and organizations are going to get frustrated. It's not going to be a fun go of it. Now, again, the people that get ahead of it and realize, okay, we understand this is a situation. A lot of organizations can't say, well, I'm going to give you, here's an extra $200 of pay so you can afford eggs. A lot of organizations can't do that because their margins may not be sufficient enough to do that. But then again, you see, some large corporations where the executive suite are getting gigantic bonuses, and the optics of that is not good. I'm not saying right or wrong. If they negotiated in their contract and all of that, it's in the contract. But the optics of it sometimes gets viewed very negatively by people that are struggling. So to answer your question, I think it's not going to get better. I certainly hope it doesn't get worse, but the writing's on the wall that we might be ahead for some more challenging times ahead. So just do whatever you can to protect yourself and, keep your mindset and take care of yourself, literally, physically and mentally, so you can navigate through these difficult times.
Mm. You mentioned you had a free book to offer.
Yeah,
Where can
yeah,
people get
yeah.
it?
My book, Burnout Proof. If you want a PDF copy of it, just go to breakfastleadership.com/burnout book. Just enter your name and email, and I'll email you a copy and some other resources that I mention in the book. It's a quick read. That's intentional, because if you're approaching burnout or are burned out, the sitting down and reading a 300-page book, you're not going to do it. I know that. So it's a short book. It starts right off and says, here are the signs. Here's some things you can do to get you back to normal. So it's a take action kind of book, and easy to consume. There's some humor in it. It's, not that burnout's funny, but I try to make light of things in life because life can be way too serious. So laughter, having worked in healthcare, I still agree is the best medicine. So just go to breakfastleadership.com/burnout book and I'll get you a copy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
also
you.
for the generous offer.
Thank you.
Gift. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Grow and Learn. We hope that you found our podcast informative, engaging, and inspiring. Our mission is to help you keep growing and learning, and we hope that our conversations and insights have provided you with practical advice and useful perspectives. If you're looking for personalized support and guidance to help you achieve your personal or professional growth objectives, I offer a range of services to help. As a trusted management partner and mentor, I work with businesses in the process of transformation, looking for new streams of business as well as M&A. With an extensive professional network of experts and mentors, I can bring on board the right person or team based on the specific needs of the company I'm working with. To learn more about the services I offer and how I can help you achieve your goals, please visit my website at grownlearn.org. You can also reach out to me via email or social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grow and Learn, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and it helps us to continue to create content that is relevant and valuable to our listeners. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights and perspectives with you in the future.